Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. US President-elect Donald Trump has chosen ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson to serve as Secretary of State, thereby setting up a heated Senate confirmation battle and signaling a desire to ease Washington's estrangement with Russia. Like Trump, Tillerson has no formal foreign policy experience but has built close relationships with many world leaders by closing massive deals across Eurasia and the Middle East on behalf of the world's largest energy company. Tillerson was originally a dark horse for the Secretary of State nomination but emerged from a lengthy public interview and vetting process. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze Trump's choice of Secretary of State and what does it indicate. Joining me on the program today are Meera, Shankar, former ambassador to the United States, Suhasini, Haidar, diplomatic editor, The Hindu, KP Vijaylaxmi, professor, School of American Studies, JNU, and Alok, Bansal, director, India Foundation. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Ambassador, I'd like to start with you, of course, first, before we talk about, what the implications really are of nominating this new Secretary of State. Is he going to get through the Senate first?
Well, I think there has been some political disquiet over the nomination, and the speculation is that if even 3 Republican senators were to withhold consent, then his nomination could be in difficulty. But the nomination itself is quite interesting because, most of the other nominees are either generals or businessmen, and Mr. Tillerson, being in the energy trade, has had close links with Russia and in fact was conferred an award by the Russian government. He knows President Putin very well. While he has not really articulated any positions on international issues or international relations, he has expressed skepticism about the impact of sanctions on Russia and the collateral damage that could be the result of such sanctions. He has also expressed interest as the head of an energy company to explore avenues of investment in Iran. So basically, this is as the head of an energy company. Obviously, if he's Secretary of State, he would be looking at things from the perspective of America's interests, though his experience will always color his approach. Trump has said that, he's somebody who, having conducted a successful global business, would be just the kind of person needed to run a successful State Department.
Indeed, indeed. KP Vijaylaxmi, both Donald Trump and Tillerson are experts at cutting deals, and we've seen over the past few years that they've done that extremely well. But where is their foreign policy expertise? That is something that's being questioned by several people in the United States.
Well, when there is a change of guard, there's always a number of things that commentaries throw up. But to say that experience alone will change or will not change things, etc., it's not like that. I think every president who takes office deserves credit for thinking through what he would like to do. And as a person who campaigns, brutal campaigns that they go through, they often lay out a world vision. And we have seen Mr. Trump giving out a number of views and also pointing out to the dramatic failures of the previous government's policies. So his worldview has been, of course, the one which has got the maximum attention has been on Muslims. And I think that worldview has deserved a lot of commentary, and therefore it's nothing new. But in terms of analysis, I would say the US foreign policy under Mr. Trump is very realist. You've used the word deal making. I would use the word pragmatism. And ExxonMobil has been in the forefront of making several types of relationships. He must have forged Mr. Tillerson, whom Mr. Trump has picked, has been a negotiator of enormous value to ExxonMobil, and even in fact better than his predecessor in ExxonMobil. I did look up his background, and apparently it was Mr. Gates and Madam Rice who actually did suggest his name.
Yes.
You know, so that seems to me that there is a Republican Party's basic articulation of foreign policy that may be coming back and maybe actually putting or shaping the nuances of this foreign policy as well. So I think there would be some interesting changes you would see in terms of the way State Department would function. But that he is a very able negotiator who gets his interests, you know, who can protect his interests and therefore will serve US is a commentary that's also surfacing today. And finally, I think Trump's picks of his cabinet, the first thing that strikes you is almost all of them, not all of them, but many of them seem to have been picked for certain agencies or for certain positions against which they had actually said that, you know, we should abolish, for example,
Indeed.
the labor person, and then of course the education person, Betsy DeVos. There are many. I mean, I've been looking at the cabinet picks so far. Perry, Governor Perry, for example. So I think he is trying to shake up the orthodoxy of the Republican Party. But at the same time, he's also shaking up the orthodoxies or the set in stone US foreign policy principles as well. So you are going to see some very different kind of people that he's picking. And some even have said that, you know, talking about Mitt Romney being interviewed for this job.
Yes.
And they said that was meant to torture him. So, you know, you never know about what kind of take people have. But the reality is he is going towards a particular articulation, which he has laid out over the years.
Sure.
And Mr. Tillerson would bring, I think, specifically special expertise on energy issues, which are very critical for the US and indeed for all of us.
Fair enough.
And energy and climate change. These are two areas where we can see some break from the past or we'll see some change from the way the US has been dealing, and whether that has any impact on the way coal industry will revive in the United States. Various other things have to fall into place. But you are seeing a puzzle coming together.
Sure.
And I think in a very short period of time, you're going to be able to actually lay out this entire puzzle and make sense of it.
The concern on many analysts is, in the United States is the fact that, we could possibly see a corporate takeover of the United States. Is that happening? Because 1/3 of the people that he has appointed thus far are, corporate tycoons, business magnates, and the likes.
Firstly, I think we need to understand that Donald Trump's election itself shows a huge discontentment with the establishment. And as a result, I think there are a fair number of appointees that he's appointed who are very unconventional. I think people with no experience of the government. And I think Mr. Tillerson is also one of them. And I think his focus on businessmen and corporate honchos actually shows that he wants to show the results as far as economy is concerned. From our point of view, that is from India's point of view, I personally find a ray of hope in Tillerson being appointed, because that indicates that there is a scope for rapprochement as far as US-Russia relations are concerned, which have been going through a rough phase for some time. And from our point of view, we would not have to make those difficult choices which we were often faced with. And I think US-Russia rapprochement also augurs well, because Sino-Russian collaboration, which we were talking of, I think then it shows that there is an attempt being made, because when we talk of Mr. Tillerson, his USP is his very good relations with the President
Vladimir Putin.
Putin, in fact, who gave him an award in 2013. And in fact, his close collaboration with Russian oil giant. In fact, to that extent, I think his appointment shows that Donald Trump wants to open a good channel of communication with Russians. And that means maybe he wants to use Russians, have closer relations, that probably wants to take on China head on probably, or something like that. And also interesting is Tillerson's opinion of Iran, because Donald Trump had made certain very antagonistic statements vis-a-vis Iran. And I think from our point of view, when we were looking at Iran, and we were hoping that after the nuclear deal, there'll be good the relations between the two countries. Of course, the recent sanctions have been retained by the Congress, and that had derailed it. So maybe with his coming, from our point of view, we see better relations of United States with Iran and Russia. which will be in our interest actually. Both these
Sure.
countries are important. While we want to retain good relations with the US, we would want these relations. And I think this unconventional team, it's difficult to know what to expect, but maybe it may be very good or could be disastrous as well. That's as far as Donald Trump presidency as a whole.
Time will
tell actually.
Yes.
It's a very difficult proposition at this
Indeed, sure, fair enough. Suhasini, as far as Russia and some of the Middle Eastern countries are concerned, they are oil-producing countries, so they know, they have dealt with Tillerson in the past, so they know what he really is like. But what about some of the non-oil-producing countries who do not know anything about Tillerson? For instance, one of the closest allies of the United States, Israel, has raised concerns. They said that they do not know anything about Tillerson, so that's something that's worrisome for them.
Well, to be honest, Mr. Tillerson is not coming as an oil magnate or as anything else. Perhaps his years as a businessman, because he has had absolutely no public service experience, will have some bearing on his dealings. He has dealt with not just the leadership of several countries, but the top business leadership of several countries too in his course, and I'm sure that what is required of him as the top diplomat of the US is to follow the policy of the Trump administration. So while it is interesting to look into what kind of character he is, I think we don't need to overstress it. Look, 200 odd countries around the world are having the same discussion we are. What does the appointments that Trump has made mean for each of us? And the answer is you're going to have to be patient to see what Mr. Trump's own policies are going to be and how his team is going to play it out. If anything, I would say, yes, Mr. Tillerson's appointment means that Mr. Trump intends to reach out to Russia, but he would have done that regardless of whether he had a Secretary of State who had a particular Russia expertise. I think what he's trying to say by this is that he'd rather have someone who is on the same page as him, rather than someone like Mitt Romney, who was very closely considered, but clearly was not on the same page as Mr. Trump when it came to several foreign policy issues, not just on Russia. So what I think you're seeing is a team that is essentially Mr. Trump's team. Remember, he has already appointed his ambassador to the UN. He has already appointed his, or at least picked, they all have to go through congressional processes. He has already picked his ambassador to China. This is before he even said who his Secretary of State would be. This is telling you that Mr. Trump intends to have very direct contacts with these countries. Mr. Trump is dealing with the issues that he thinks are important right now, so he has to get this cabinet put together. But the signal, if anything, that is going out is this is Mr. Trump's team, and it will be his policies regardless of what combination you see his nominees as being. You know, he's an oil magnate, he's a businessman, he has dealings with Russia, etc., etc. Or you can just see him as the person he is. He's the CEO of ExxonMobil, one of the world's oil giants. He knows how to manage the State Department, and he knows how to make friends and influence people.
Indeed, indeed. Ambassador, as far as some of the other parts of the world are concerned, for instance, Alok Bansal brought up India, but let's look at, the Far East and Japan and South Korea and some of those allies of the United States. What does this appointment mean for them? Because Donald Trump, right from the beginning, has said that Japan and South Korea need to pay up for the, for the military assistance that they've been getting from the United States. So what's going to happen there?
I think these things we have to wait and see. It's it's too early to start making prognostications, because whether the rhetoric of the campaign is going to be translated into actual policy detail, I think is still open, and we have to wait and see how this evolves. For India, having a business person as in charge of the State Department is something which may work to our advantage, because as a large market, I think business has always looked more closely at India, and therefore this plays to our economic strength at some level. In terms of his own qualities, Mr. Trump has praised him for his tenacity, broad understanding of geopolitics, and said that he's the person to do the job. So let's see how it progresses. clearly Mr. Trump intends to also leave his own stamp on policy. And we are seeing that in terms of the choices that he's making for his cabinet.
You know, another choice that he has made is that of Mad Dog Mattis, of course, and he is someone who's you know, we all know what his views really are like. So from that perspective, you know, what does it mean for India? He's also gone on and said that Pakistan is going to be a key ally for us. These are some of the things that he has said. So does that mean it's going to, you know, ruin the work that Ashton Carter and India have done in the recent past?
You know, we have seen over the past decade that there has been a bipartisan support for Indo-US relationship. The blossoming of it and the transformation of it has been in both countries. I think there's been a certain amount of continuity. Nevertheless, as has been stated, every president who comes in, and this is something you see from the reading of history, it's not about just reading about the personalities, but just the process itself. Every president does like to leave or start with a, you know, new program. They would like a doctrinaire approach to be named after them and so on. So Trump crusade now is already making the round. So there will be some more words that will come in. But I think Indo-US relations, and particularly the defense ties, are based on a certain number of parameters which haven't changed according to me. But whether the articulation, for example, the phone call,
yes,
the famous phone call to Nawaz Sharif, that excited a lot of commentary. Well, I'm not very sure that, you know, this, I still recall when Mr. Obama took office, we had a similar problem. I think the problem is about India thinking that we may get hyphenated again with Pakistan, which I don't see happening. All logic tells you that we are a huge economy, we are growing, and Indo-US relations have moved on to a different set of parameters, so there should be no problem. But yes, in terms of actual, you know, what do you call it, the wordings, yes, there is a certain amount of contentiousness because Indians have felt that, what does this mean? You know, why? And indeed, even in the United States, there's been a lot of questioning on what did this phone call actually mean? What do they mean when they say? Because we are now known as major defense partners. And Pakistan is a non-NATO ally. So the differences between, and this moniker was supposed to be unique to India, and whether that, so, but to answer your question about whether Ashton Carter, again, I would say that, you know, apart from personalities, and I do believe that personalities matter, it's not that, you know, there's a dot sitting over there and doing something mechanically. Personalities do matter, their beliefs matter. Theories have told us now that, you know, leadership itself is now personality driven, etc. So it is important. Therefore, I think what would happen is that Pakistan's value to the United States is logically diminishing as they withdraw from Afghanistan. So in what other ways will Pakistan be a player in US-Pakistan relations, and US foreign policy is something we need to think about.
Indeed.
But whether that would really automatically have a cascading effect on US-India relations or Indo-US relations, I don't see that.
Indeed. You know, talking about phone calls, Alok Bansal.
If I may just mention,
yes, please,
on the
please.
defense side,
yes,
I mean, you've just had the defense authorization bill, which has made this designation of India as a major defense partner into law.
yeah,
So in that sense, legislation would need to be overturned. And this has been passed with overwhelming Republican and Democratic majority
That's
in
right.
both
Yeah.
houses.
Sure.
Therefore, it puts the whole relationship on a firmer legislative basis, and it's not so easy to change. They've also clarified that the designation as major defense partner means that India would be treated now for purposes of defense sales and technology transfer and co-production, joint development, on par with their closest partners and allies.
indeed,
Yeah.
indeed.
Earlier, we were just, on par with their major strategic partners, not their allies.
Indeed.
So this means, if it translates into actual deliverables, then that the access to technology and equipment that India would have would be far easier and perhaps also could be more sophisticated.
Sure. Fair
Frank,
enough.
the
Yeah.
point is that this is an independent relationship and we need to discuss it from that point of view.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's my view.
Suhasini, talking about phone calls, of course, there was another phone call between Taiwan and the United States, of course. China seemed to be very perturbed by that particular phone call. And Donald Trump himself has questioned the one China policy. So could we see Russia and the United States coming together maybe at some point in time and cornering China somewhere?
Well, let's be honest, right now the two closer of the triangle are China and Russia. And there's certainly every possibility that Russia and the US could corner China. There's also the same possibility that Russia could play a mediator between China and the US, because in the last few years, we have seen China and Russia come together in ways never seen before, including the $300 billion deal for gas and energy that they have been talking about. So we're looking at a whole new scenario. I think any new president, not just the US president, will always look at countries in two ways. How much can you help me? How much can you harm me? And I think what Mr. Trump is beginning to do is to see which are the possible problem areas for him and how he can either manage them already or certainly push back the balance. You know, by taking that phone call from the president of Taiwan, we don't really know exactly how much thought went into it. I mean, there are some accounts of it which seem to indicate that simply one of the Republican leaders who happens to run a lobby firm for Taiwanese businesses suggested that he should take the call, and he didn't see a problem with it. There are others who suggest that he is reworking America's policy entirely, way back to 1979, since the last US president made this kind of contact. The question remains really how seriously thought through this new policy is. He has certainly said that yes, even the one China policy can be reconsidered. But I think what he's trying to do is push back against countries that he sees as a possible threat and say things are not going to be the same, it isn't going to be business as usual, and certainly you're going to have to rework a new relationship with me. And I think you're going to see that in a lot of places. What is important, though, to see also is at the same time as he is doing this pushback with China and discussing politically rebalancing, he's also said some things very clearly. In interviews before his election, he said, for example, that he would consider taking US troops out of areas like South Korea or Japan unless they were paid for, unless there was a real reason to be there. He has said very clearly that he intends to pull out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership,
yes.
The TPP. Does this mean that he is going to unwittingly or wittingly leave space for China to take a more dominant role in this part of the world? I think these are questions for everyone to consider.
Indeed, indeed. I've got 2 minutes left on the program, so I'd like to get closing comments from all my guests. Alok, Bansal, beginning with you, of course, your final comments on the program.
My final comments are actually one of the important factors which I just wanted to button was this Nawaz Sharif's phone call which was coming up. In fact, it's Nawaz Sharif who had called up and then he said something and which was subsequently countered. What's important is General James Mattis has actually served both in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yes.
He has a views as far as the radical outfits are concerned. He definitely has a viewpoint as far as Pakistan is concerned. As far as Tillerson is concerned, I have my doubts whether he'll find it easy to get ratified because his opening up to Russia, he stands to materially get benefited because he has still huge investments in the energy sectors, and I think he will come under a lot of cloud. So I think his appointment as Secretary of State, to my mind, is still a question mark. Though from India's point of view, it will be a desirable thing. We have no problems with him, and I think this Trump administration, from as it appears as of now, besides the H-1B visa and the problems to the IT firms, seems amenable to Indian policy as far as the region is concerned.
Sure. Ambassador Shankar, your closing comments?
I think we have to wait and see. It's too early to draw patterns in terms of how this administration is going to conduct its foreign policy. Certainly, there's been a degree of unpredictability.
Sure.
You know, the phone call with Nawaz Sharif. Nawaz Sharif's description of the conversation has not really been denied. It's been followed by comments by the Vice President, Mike Pence, reiterating, you know, Trump's ability to do deal making between
Sure.
India and Pakistan, and so on. But I don't think any clear pattern is available,
Fair enough.
except that I think Mr. Trump clearly wants to try to open up to Russia or mend fences with Russia, because he sees that as giving the US more options vis-a-vis China.
Indeed. Vijaylaxmi, is there an emergence of a new world order?
Yes, and I think he has given several indications of it. The big difference is Mr. Bush began with the Freedom Initiative to give political liberalization to the Middle East, and therefore that will, you know, stop the recruitment to terrorist outfits and so on. President Obama started with engagement and deep respect for Muslim injustice and Cairo speech and all that. And now, overturning both of these, you are seeing Mr. Trump argue for a more conflictual approach.
Sure.
And he has said that radical Islam, and he has used the word, and so how he's going to look at this and, you know, think about all of the other stuff goes on, you know, things
Sure,
are all
fair
the time.
enough.
But there will be a change, and I think we'll have to wait and see. But that I agree. We'll have to wait and see.
And so,
But there are
Suhasini, a
some
quick
things.
final closing comment from you, because I'm completely out of time.
Sure, very quickly, apart from everything else the guests have spoken of, I think India needs to just look at what it needs to do when it is confronted with a US government that is essentially made up of businessmen who make it clear that making in America first, putting American business first, cutting down on visas is a priority for them. If you add that with what we are already seeing in the UK and in the European Union, India needs to double up on its idea of building jobs over here, because the next few years are going to see some tough times from that point.
Indeed. All right. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Meera, Shankar, Suhasini, Haidar, KP Vijaylaxmi and Alok, Bansal, thank you so much for joining me on the program today and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching.